some stragglers coming in. There's seating for them, so we'll just get started. First, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, sharing your evening with us. And we have people watching on live stream, as well as people will be joining us through Rogers TV. So thank you for coming to show that you care about the health of your democracy and the health of your natural world. For those that don't know me, my name is Margaret Prophet. I'm with the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. Some of you may not be familiar with our organization, so I'll just tell you very quickly. We formed in 2017, and the idea was to bring groups across Simcoe County that were concerned about affordability, concerned about farmland, natural heritage, democracy, and effective government. And the idea was to get people on the same page so that we could build power of people to make our communities healthier, sustainable, and more affordable. So we've been doing that since 2017. We started with about 12 groups, and now we're close to 50. And one of the key things we've been doing is advocating for the Greenbelt, not only to bring it further into Simcoe County, but also to protect the existing Greenbelt that's throughout Ontario. If I could just switch to the next slide there. For those that come from Simcoe County, this is the best map we have for tonight, so I apologize for that. But the Greenbelt isn't outside of this region. In fact, if you've been in Clearview, such as Duntroon, Creemore, Dunedin, if you've been in the Niagara Escarpment, you've been in the Greenbelt. If you live or have been in New Tecumseh and have visited Tottenham, Colgan, or Loretto, that's the Oak Ridges Moraine, which is also a part of the Greenbelt. If you've been east of Bradford and you've seen the Holland Marsh, that is specialty cropland, that is also part of the Greenbelt. So it's not unfamiliar to Simcoe County, and it's not something that is just external to us and doesn't matter. You should also know that the Greenbelt covers 2/3 of the Lake Simcoe shoreline. So that Greenbelt is used with the Lake Simcoe Protection Act to make sure that there's buffers to keep that precious jewel that we have of Lake Simcoe clean and healthy. So when we hear that the Greenbelt is under attack, I want everyone to understand that that is a devaluing and a commodification of the places that are important to us here too. And that's something that we didn't want to let stand. So tonight I am joined by fabulous guest speakers who will introduce themselves because they'll probably want to tell you a little bit about themselves in their own way. But tonight is actually about you, the public. How we felt tonight was supposed to go was that when you have an accountable democracy, that the people who have been entrusted to power should be accountable to the people that voted them in and should be able to answer questions. As you can see, I haven't, well, except for Franz. Franz isn't one of the MPPs, but we have, would you like to answer those questions on their behalf, Franz? We did invite MPP Downey, MPP Mulrooney, and MPP Dunlop, and there's a reason why we invited those three, although there are 5 Simcoe County PC MPPs. Some of you may not know, in December of 2022, 30 cabinet ministers, including Doug Ford and key staff, sat around a table and talking about whether they should take pieces out of the Greenbelt. What we know now, because of the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner's reports, is that process was biased. It increased the value for preferential developers, ones that were identified as friends for the Premier, and raised the asset value of their land holdings to at least $8.3 billion. We know that the housing crisis is dire, that we need to have affordable places to live, but their own experts and staff tell us very clearly that that's not actually what's needed. So we wanted them to come here because they all signed off on this Greenbelt scandal, like I said, with the rest of their 30 cabinet ministers, to ask them why they signed it, what did they know about the deal, do they still support the Greenbelt, because many of them said they did when they first came to politics, and also, do they support the plan that Doug Ford has now, which is not only just to look at those 14 pieces of land, now he is expediting the process to look at the entire Greenbelt and potentially another 600 to 800 developer applications for lands across the Greenbelt. So unfortunately, even though we've had multiple invitations, we did not have them show tonight, but those were the types of questions that I think the public deserves answers to. So without further ado, how tonight is going to work is our panelists are going to do a short introductory comment. We have Myiingan, David Crombie, Tim Gray, and Franz. And it's Franz Hartmann, sorry. You can, maybe some of you can read their things from there. They're going to do short introductory comments, and then it's really about you. What questions do you have? What things do you want to say? What kind of information do you need? And how can we work together as a community to make sure that our democracy is healthy going forward, and that the communities that we're building are actually ones that are going to make it sustainable and healthy and affordable for all of us, which is not the direction we're heading in. So it's up to you first. My friend Myiingan will come up and introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Myiingan, for that introduction and a little bit of lesson on why we're here, because of the activity around the Greenbelt, the alleged activity around the Greenbelt. But I just, for us as Indigenous people, this has been going on for a long time for us, this kind of activity. So you know what it feels like now. To me, it's not really new. To me, I wake up and I go, oh yeah, again? But I am Jeff Montague. That's my English name. That's my name for the record for Indian Affairs. But I'm also called Myiingan, Minonaakwhe, which is wolf shoots well. And I'm from the Beausolieil First Nation on Christian Island. That's where I grew up. I spent most of my life there until I joined the military. And I was in the Canadian military for about a decade. Came home, became chief. I did another 10 years, and I actually worked on the thing I'm going to be talking about tonight and saw it through to its end. One of the things that I was taught along the way was about protocol and how important protocol is. But in the way that I was taught was a little bit different. The way I understand things is that we have trees that sit side by side in the forest or stand side by side in the forest, and their crowns will never touch one another. And they have respect for each other. They have respect for one another as neighbors. My people learned about those protocols of the natural world, and it became part of our natural law. And we use that natural law to build our societies. And it became the basis for everything that we were about. And we had agreements with other nations, other indigenous nations in our area, even in this area. And they were part of that natural law, those protocols. And so we made agreements with them through wampum, which is treaties. And we are allowed to live together on these lands that we are on now, today, with the Haudenosaunee, with the Wendat, with the Bédon, and the Anishinaabeg were here as well, my people. There's evidence of us living together. It's always been in our stories. It's always been there. We were always told that. Even though the narrative was that we fought together all the time, it would have been exhaustive for us to do that on a daily basis, day after day after day, just fighting one another. We wouldn't have been able to sustain that. And we knew that because in our stories, we knew about these protocols. We knew about these agreements. And we knew that we had to live side by side. So there's evidence of that in excavations that were done even here in this town of Barrie, just in the southern part into Molson, what became Molson Park. Excavations through the 80s found that there were encampments there that had all of those nations in them at one time. And that backed up our stories, that we did do that. And we lived together, and those people that carried those wampums, they carried those wampums into each other's communities, And anyone who carried that, it was a very prestigious position. And that person could not ever be harmed. Even if they did go into battle, they could never harm that person who carried those agreements. Because those protocols were revisited once peace was made. And that's what this land was about. How we consulted one another if we were going here or there, and how long we were going to be here or there. We told each other that. But that all changed a few hundred years ago, which to us is like yesterday, really, in our history. And it was overtaken by a wave. And this wave almost buried us and almost buried our customs. And they replaced, the people that made this wave replaced those protocols with their own ones that they brought over. And they asked us to trust that what they did and what they said was the truth. And so they did make wampums with us at the beginning, treaties. But they broke them almost immediately. And that happened over and over, and I don't have time to tell you every which one, but we know that it happened over and over. And even up until 2017, when my people finally settled the 1923 Williams Treaty land claim, we did that in Rama. And we had ministers come from the federal government and from the provincial government, and they apologized for what they did to us. They apologized for dispossessing us of those lands. And they all agreed that we would all be allowed to use those lands again and to harvest on those lands again. Part of that was the Greenbelt. And we had an agreement on that date in November of 2017. We had an agreement that none of those lands would ever be touched without free, prior, informed consent to us from the government. As is laid out and stated in a number of agreements that we have, a number of protocols that we have, including the Constitution. And on that day, both of those governments signed that they would do this. And here we are 6 years later, and it's already been breached. Just a short 6 years later. So it happens to us all the time. You almost have to expect it. I woke up next day, I was wondering, when's this going to happen? Some strange way you knew that it was going to happen. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're here in this situation. This government has even gone so far as to run roughshod over us, but they don't even look at you guys either. They don't even help you. And they walk past you, and they don't even talk to you. And that's wrong for any government. And you shouldn't accept it anymore. Long ago, when we understood how the trees didn't touch one another, and they had that respect for one another, we tried to emulate that. We tried to be that. And I'll tell you, we're still like that. We don't like it when the crown touches us. But everything that is affected in that Greenbelt will affect us in a big way, because we are the First Nations that represent the Williams Treaty. We were supposed to have rights within those territories. And we didn't know this was going on. So we do have something to say, and we will say it loudly as a people, and we'll say it with you. That's what we're here for. Miigwech. Thank you.
That was almost a standing ovation. Talk about power. And followed up by another powerful individual, Mr. David Crombie.
He's not that tall. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation to come tonight, and I was listening, by the way, to our friend. I spent some part of my life as a minister involved with Indigenous affairs, and I thought he was going to go through with some ritual I was looking forward to, but he did better than that. He said we're on the same side, and so thanks very much. So thanks for the invitation to come today. I wasn't sure what I could add to what you already know. But I thought I'd start, this may seem strange, but I thought I'd start some 40 years ago. I won't be long. But this is the 40th anniversary this year of the Niagara Escarpment Plan. It's the very first major step made some 40 years ago to take in our own hands our ability to deal with environmental matters, land use planning matters for our own future. That was followed over the next 10 years, some hard work by thousands and thousands of people, and out of that came the 2002 Oak Ridges Moraine Plan. And there are people here who remember that fight. It was followed as well by the 2005 growth plan and the 2006 green plan. I think I got that wrong. Reverse those if you wouldn't mind. But those four plans became the knuckles of what we needed to do to have an environment, a physical environment that we could live in appropriately. They were brought together in 2015 to 2017, where all four plans were brought together by an independent panel of 6 people, and they held meetings across the region, many regions, many meetings of regions. We had, I can't remember how many open houses, we had 42,000 submissions from people and organizations on how to make what had become the Greenbelt, those 4 plans, make it better. And the panel itself made 87 recommendations, handed them into the government in 2017. It was a tremendous piece of work. And if I go back the 40 years, it's the work of tens of thousands of people and organizations who had hopes that they could make it a better place for our children, grandchildren, and so on. The government changed, and the new government looked at the 87 recommendations and didn't adopt one of them, even though the panel's recommendations, which included people from the land development industry, from farmers, so on, all unanimous, the 87 recommendations, this government did not look at it at all. What they did do was bury that plan, and in its place, they adopted a series of programs and policies and bills in the legislature that began to undermine the ability of our institutions and processes to be able to figure out our best way of combining ecology, economy, and community. They looked for ways not to do anything from our report, but they looked for ways to undermine our ability to do something about it. And that's where we are today. So I'm if I have a message today for you, and I hope it's a message well, you do. You know what I really want to say. We're in a new phase. And that phase is that it's clear now that we have a provincial government that is absolutely opposed to the Greenbelt. Not in some small way, not something minor that they would like to change, or some other tack they'd like to make. It is now clear that the Premier himself, when asked about the Greenbelt, said it's just a sea of weeds. It's a scam. They're not my words. That's the Premier's understanding of the Greenbelt. So the first thing to remember for this phase we're in now, in the fight, is we have a government that is opposed to the continued existence of the Greenbelt, which is one of the great achievements of this province in its history. And if you travel around the world, you'll find that people who pay attention to these things laud the work that was done. Secondly, not only do we have a government that is opposed to the Greenbelt and wants to get rid of it, they are willing to engage in any kind of process or politics that undermines its ability to continue. It has gone way out of its way to show that they are willing to corrupt processes, they're willing to act in a dishonorable and dishonest way, willing to say things that are not true, all in order to achieve their own goals. You don't have to take my word for it. Read the report from the Auditor General, read the report from the Ethics Commissioner. So we have, first of all, as I say, a government that wants to get rid of the Greenbelt. Two, will go to whatever lengths it needs to do so, and have shown that. And thirdly and finally, perhaps the most important thing in some ways, because if you can't trust the government, it doesn't matter the policies you can fight about. It doesn't matter about the issues you can fight about. But if you don't trust the government, you're in trouble. This is an untrustworthy government. And that's the third thing to keep in mind, because we've got a fight ahead of us. We now need to make sure that we take them head on. As our friend said, he's with us. Increasingly, there are thousands and thousands and thousands who are going to join the 10,000s of people who came before us to save this Greenbelt. No matter how old you are, or who you are, or who you think you are, it's a job to be done. So it was a pleasure for me to come and join with people who are taking it on. Thanks very much.
I'm a little taller, so I'm gonna, and Tim's even taller than me, and I don't know about Tim and Franz. I don't know who would be taller, so I'm gonna move it up a little bit. Thank you, David. It's always been a pleasure to know you. I promise you, folks, that they just keep getting better. There's not a bad speaker up here except for me myself. We have Tim Gray from Environmental Defense, who hopefully will give us a little bit of history about kind of what's going on here. So, Tim.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks everyone for coming here tonight. It's always hard to go after David. You know, I'm taller, but smaller and experienced, so we'll see what I can do. I want to pick up where he left off a little bit and dive into where we're at as a result of the actions of this government. As David so aptly described, the creation of the Greenbelt, the creation of the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the creation of the Oak Ridges Moraine, the beginning of moving our cities and towns towards something that is more sustainable, where you could actually have access to public transit, where you could get to services without your car, turning the trajectory away from the sprawling development that has dominated Southern Ontario since the Second World War and when cars took over our culture. That was all beginning to happen, and this government wants to go in the opposite direction. So Let's explore a little bit about that. So we had, I don't know, what are you saying, David, 40 years of governments, NDP governments, Liberal governments, conservative governments that all saw the reason for moving in this direction until Premier Ford and his new government. We know that in 2018 that this new government was elected with the aggressive support of Ontario Proud and its online attack machine. You probably saw some of the ads on Facebook. This was characterized by the people behind Ontario Proud and their dominance on social media as being grassroots supported by the donations of people like you, eager to turn the page and get beyond all this horrible planning and environmental protection. But we found out 6 months after the election that Ontario Proud was actually funded by a consortium of developers. Chief among them was Mattamy Homes, and they collectively contributed $500,000 to run the attack ad campaign on the previous provincial government. Many of which the ads, if you've seen them, were attacks on the Premier at the time, many of them viciously homophobic and misogynist. These are the people that are behind what we're seeing in Ontario right now. The results, these developers really grabbed the ear and the attention of our newly elected Premier and his government. As the Premier himself has said, and David mentioned this, he says these people are his friends. These developers made no secret they don't like the rules that protect wetlands, forests, farms, and the Greenbelt. They don't like rules that make them build more homes in communities or rules that make them more financially accessible to people that need to buy homes. Why is that? Well, it's because they make vast sums of money buying farmland cheap, getting it rezoned for development, and then building expensive single-family detached homes on it. By the way, they also don't like any rules that make them pay for the costs of new sewers, roads, water supplies, schools, parks, or anything else that are required to service these low-density, distributed communities built in our natural spaces. So the developers had a great friend in the Premier's office, who wanted to help them. And then they were presented with another opportunity, housing prices. Rising housing prices in Ontario have been driven by years of historically low interest rates, foreign and domestic buyers who see buying a house or an extra house as a no-lose investment opportunity, changes to tax laws that killed rental housing construction, and governments, many governments, removing themselves from the task of supporting development of housing like co-op housing. These factors all combined together to cause a decade-and-a-half run on housing prices until they were reaching absolutely unaffordable levels. Then enter the COVID pandemic, inflation, and then risingly rapid interest rates as federal governments and banks, national banks across the world tried to get a handle on inflation. And then we had a situation where homes that were previously already getting really expensive, leaping out of reach for all those but the very rich, those who are selling an existing high-value property and moving somewhere else, or happen to have parents that are millionaires. So a long simmering problem became a crisis. And the old adage of never missing an opportunity in a crisis is not unknown to the billionaire sprawl developers and their friends within our Ontario government. And so began the loud and repeated proclamations by the Premier, his ministers, and developers that environmental protection, planning rules, and the Greenbelt were creating a scarcity of land available for homes, and that's why housing prices and rents are so high. It's the environment, it's rules, it's everybody else's fault, and the solution, of course, give more land to the developers. Well, that could seem like it made sense. For the average person who does not know the details of housing supply and prices, it might sound reasonable. If you increase the supply of something, maybe it should become cheaper. Unfortunately, this is a situation where the simple solution is also the wrong one. Why is that? Firstly, there was and is no shortage of land designated for housing construction in this province. This is because cities and regions are legally required to plan for all of their housing needs, for all of the population that's going to arrive in their cities for 30 years out. They know what's coming, they planned for it, the land is already allocated. So what does that mean? It means when this government was elected, there was already a massive surplus of land already designated within our towns, within our cities to build houses on. In fact, there was so much land designated that if we only took 20% of that land and built at the densities of the neighborhood where I live in downtown Toronto, like Trinity Bellwoods, if you've ever been there, low-rise houses, single-family, semis, townhouses. This isn't a neighborhood of skyscrapers and monster condos. It's low density. Build at that density, we would use 20% of the land that's already been designated. Just ignore the rest of it in the Greenbelt. Another aspect of this misunderstanding is that making more land available will not, under any circumstances, make sure that more houses are built. And why is this? Almost nobody who's buying a new house in this region at this time buys a piece of land, finds an architect, finds a contractor, and builds their own house. Maybe in 1950s, when my parents built their house here in Barrie, maybe that's how you did it. That's how my dad did it. But nobody does that. Where do you get your new home? You buy it from a large developer in a massive subdivision. You might buy a condo and a monster building in a city, but no one's building their own house. So what do the developers do? They get holds of these large chunks of land, and they put houses onto the market slowly. And they do that in conversation with each other in regards to the market. They do that in a way to maintain a high price. They're not in the business of selling houses cheap to help all of you. They're in the business of selling houses expensive to make lots of money. So more land, all that does is allow them to speculate. Buy it cheap from the farmers, get it rezoned like they're doing with the Greenbelt, and make a lot of money on the increase in value. And as our Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner and the Housing Affordability Task Force have all shown, none of these facts matter to the Ontario government and their developer friends. And so Ford Nation attacks on 60 years of progress begin, and there are many. 7,400 acres of land taken out of the Greenbelt, including parts that have been legislatively protected for 15 years. The reanimation of the 413 Zombie Highway, canceled by the previous government. Rules protecting wetlands so gutted that our conservation authorities tell us that 85 to 95% of the wetlands currently protected in this province are going to lose that protected status. Changes to the Endangered Species Act that allow developers to destroy habitat if they pay into a fund instead of avoiding the habitat where the creatures live. We call it the pay-to-slay fund. Conservation authorities, I mean, it's funny, but also horrible. Conservation authorities removed from their role of protecting ecological values and planning. All requirements to build more homes and condos within towns and cities removed. Subdivisions that now can be built anywhere at any time, no planning required, no official plan amendments required. Conservation authorities required to identify all the conservation lands, the places you go with your kids, go with your grandkids, go hiking. Those all have to be inventoried for which ones we can build monster homes on by next year. Well, they were doing all of this. They did nothing to address the requirements that were put in front of them by their own Housing Affordability Task Force that told them how they could build more houses in the places where people want to live and where they could afford them. But in this maelstrom of attacks, it can be hard to keep our bearings. I know I lose my bearings sometimes. It's just like another thing coming. But through all of this, we have worked together. Citizens in this province, we've worked together really, really effectively. We stopped the first round of attacks on the Greenbelt, if you remember, Bill 66 in the fall of December 2018. They made a mistake that time. Remember, they introduced the bill on December 6th, and then the House rose on the 7th, and when they came back in January, we've been organizing for 8 weeks. We scared the hell of them, and they backtracked. We stopped 413 from going ahead as planned by getting the federal government to intervene. We won a legal case that actually stopped the government from walking away from their responsibility on the Holland Marsh destroying Bradford bypass. just south of here. We've informed the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner and the RCMP investigations that are ongoing. We've informed overwhelming media coverage on this issue, and we've helped organize the largest movement for change in Ontario's history. I know Ontarians are on the side of all of us in this room because we've asked them. 86% of the people in this province oppose the Greenbelt attacks and want homes built inside of cities that they can afford for themselves and for their kids. Our government's actions are reckless, irresponsible, and corrupt, and they must be stopped. That means means we must work with the federal government to ensure their legislative authority is brought to bear to block destructive projects. It means working with our municipal governments to make sure that they do not cooperate in any way with enabling these attacks on the Greenbelt, and that they ensure that their priorities for building homes inside of their communities are put to the forefront. And it means that our MPPs, not Franz, at the end of the table who are not here, are held accountable for their government's actions, and they are forced to listen to the people in this room, the people across the province, and together we are going to win, and we're going to take back Ontario. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Certainly last but not least, or last but certainly not least, MPP Franz Hartmann. No, I'm just kidding. Franz Hartmann from the Alliance for Liveable Ontario.
Thank you, Margaret. And I just want to echo, thank you so much for coming out this evening. So I've been an environmental activist for over 30 years now. I don't know how that happened, but here it is. And I mention that for context, not because of anything else. I've been involved with the Greenbelt issues for well over 15, 16 years now. And I am part of something called the Ontario Greenbelt Alliance. And we were part of the large coalition that stopped Bill 66 that Tim talked to you about. And I remember after that fight thinking, you know, this was great, but we don't have enough people with us. Still mostly environmentalists and people who care about the natural environment. And that concerned me because I know how easy politics can be used to divide people. We see it in the United States a lot. We see it increasingly here, unfortunately. And then something happened last summer of 2022. And I was paying attention to what people were saying about the housing crisis and the Greenbelt and so forth. And I realized an increasing number of stakeholder groups, farmers, housing activists, labor people, land use planners, community organizations were getting increasingly upset with what was happening at Queen's Park, with what was happening in the Premier's office. And so in September, we decided, well, we're kind of strange bedfellows, but why don't we get together and figure out how we can work together? And we had a meeting in the fall, it was almost a year ago, and I remember being in that meeting feeling incredible hope, because here were farmers talking with downtown Toronto housing activists about how we can work together and stop the Ford government from doing devastating things that would not only harm farmland protection and the Greenbelt, but also things that are harming dealing with the affordable housing crisis and the larger housing crisis. And so he said, let's create a space where we can work together, where we can do more than simply put out fires, because too often that's what activists do. We're responding to what governments are doing or very powerful interests. And so we created this organization, not an organization, it's a network, let's be real, called the Alliance for Liveable Ontario. And the purpose of the alliance is not to replicate or duplicate or overwrite or take over from other places. It's a space for us to get together and to collaborate and to strategize and to make sure that we're working together as best as possible. And I can tell you, that was back in September. We're now a year later. It's working. Across the province, farmers are working with housing activists, are working with land use planners, are working with people from the labor community, even developers who are upset at the sprawl mandate that the province is pushing, and we are making a difference. And so I want all of you to know this is happening, not just in Barrie, not just in Simcoe, but in York, in Durham, in Waterloo Region, in Wellington County, all over the province. People are upset. And guess what? There's a lot of you, and you can collaborate and you can work together, and the Alliance is one possible network that allows you to do that. So I want to leave you with hope that we can actually change this. We can stop this. And most importantly, we can build a livable neighborhoods and livable Ontario. This is not rocket science, what needs to happen. Protecting the Greenbelt, protecting farmland, building housing, different types of housing in places where people actually live and want to live and work. This is not rocket science. This has been happening for thousands of years. What's different this time, as David said, is we have a government that we can't trust anymore because they are doing things that are very, very, very dangerous and very undemocratic. They're trying to suck democracy out of government, which is extremely unfortunate. So what can you do? The first, and I would say the most important thing everyone can do, is contact their MPP. Even if your MPP is not a progressive conservative or member of government, doesn't matter. Call them, contact them. Let them know that the Greenbelt land grab cannot continue. They have to reverse that decision, and they need to do everything they can do to make that happen. Number two, contact your local council. Councils actually have quite a bit of power. They are creatures of the province under the Canadian Constitution, but they can nonetheless, at minimum, slow down bad policies that are coming from Queen's Park. Councils are the ones that decide how much money to, whether or not development can take place in a particular area or not. So contact your councillors and tell them to oppose all provincially mandated land use planning policies until they have been properly investigated. And that's the third thing you can do, is the Alliance for Liveable Ontario sent a letter to the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. All of this is on our website, by the way, so don't feel you have to copy it all down. We sent a letter asking the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioners to expand their investigations to look at a whole bunch of other planning decisions that have been made in the last 6 months, because we believe those decisions may very well have been the result of processes as corrupt as the one that was followed for the Greenbelt land grab. So you can go online and endorse our letter. We will be submitting that information to the Integrity Commissioner and Auditor General, all the names of everybody who's signed on to that. And finally, and I would say as importantly as the other three, is you need to talk to your friends and neighbors and colleagues. We have to continue ramping up the public outcry that's out there. It's loud, and as Tim said, it's probably higher than it's been in a long, long time, but it has to be louder. And you all play a role. Every one of you probably knows 100 or 200 people. And if you can just reach out to 10 of them and show them why this is wrong and why it has to change and what we can collectively do to build a livable Ontario, we will turn this public outcry into a roar. So those are the actions you can take. If you go to liveableontario.ca, there's a whole action page that you can get to from the homepage of our website. Go there. There are lots of local groups that are working on this. So Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition is working on it. There are lawn signs outside that you can put up with Hands Off the Greenbelt. There are a whole bunch of things you can do. Bottom line is act. Continue making sure that politicians and your neighbors and whatever know how outraged you are with what's going on, and that there is actually hope for a livable Ontario. Thank you.
Now comes the fun part. This is where we actually turn it over to everybody here. We have 2 volunteers at the back, Linda and Anna, it looks like. And we're not going to make you line up, but if you'd like to ask a question, if you have a comment, then please raise your hand and they will make sure the mic gets to you. Oh, we have someone who just walked by. There you go. And I will repeat the questions just so that everyone can hear it.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm not very good at speaking, so pardon me. I just wanted to say I come from Bolton, and I'm part of the Stop the 413 and the Hands Off the Greenbelt group. We have an organized group. I have organized rallies, and I'm here to vouch for Tim Gray's organization. They're wonderful. They helped us with the last protest we organized in Vaughan. And we have to get together. This is all about us. We can fight these people because it's really appalling what's happening. And I just wanted to add something because, as a matter of fact, tonight was our first meeting after the virtual meeting after the summer break for the Stop the 413, so I'm missing that. But there is an alternative to the 413, and maybe it won't affect you guys too much in Barrie, but the 407 is underused and it's documented. There's lots of evidence to that point. And it has been reviewed by so many experts, and it was also suggested to the Ford government that instead of building a highway that will lead to nowhere except more traffic, the 407 should just be turned over to the public. And by the way, 51% of the ownership of the 407 is now with the teachers union. So it is Canadian. It's no longer foreign-owned, 100%. So there is definitely a much easier, faster way to resolve the traffic headaches. Because a lot of people think, oh my goodness, we need a highway because there's so much traffic. But sprawl will only bring more traffic. So within a couple of years of the 413 being built, it'll be just as bad, if not worse, on all the other highways. So that's all I have to say. Organize, get together, organize rallies. It'll make you feel good. In fact, I recognize a few faces of people who participated at the rallies.
We're not going to identify people here, don't worry.
No. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And I'll just point out that the map we have on the back here is the 2 darkest lines are the 2 highways that are planned, actually 3. The 413, as you can see, is the one closest to the bottom, and then you've got the Bradford bypass, and then a 3rd highway that they're planning driving through the Greenbelt. So all of the green is the Greenbelt, as you'd expect. So thank you for bringing that. The attacks on the Greenbelt didn't start now. They started with highways first because they need access to houses. If you're going to I'll come to you, Irina. Or do you have a question?
I do. The signs that you have at the lobby, are they for sale or by donation?
Take as many as you like as you can put up.
Okay, I'll handle it.
We have lots of signs at the back if you want to take some before you go, if you have a question. Okay. If you can just for everybody, because we're going to have probably lots of people that want to make comments or questions, if you can kind of keep it to 30 seconds, 45 seconds, that would be great so everybody can get a chance. Go ahead.
30 seconds, Margaret.
Yeah, I know. I'm challenging. I'm challenging you.
My name's Gary Christie, and I'm director of the Ottawa Saga Steelheaders. We do a lot of conservation work. Just for your information too, as a biologist, what they're talking about here is quite interesting because I get to see it at the base level. When I'm in the river and I'm fishing, I can see bugs and insects. The state of the rivers in terms of what we see in those bugs and insects is changing. In other words, the bugs that used to inhabit these rivers are not there anymore. And that's an indication of the decline of the river. Okay, so I get to see it. What they're showing here about the Greenbelt and what's opening up, I've seen the development occurring. I've fished the Minonaakwhe for 40 years. And I've got to see the changes that are occurring. We're trying to fight that. But the question I want to ask, actually I asked Tim about this, was that we're here and we're fighting against Ford. But there's another part of this, another party or group of party. It's the developers. So we see a lot of signs out there saying, save the Greenbelt, hands off the Greenbelt. They seem to be directed to Ford. I asked Tim, is there something we could do to make that other part of the issue, the developers, okay? They should start to feel the pain. In other words, a sign out there that says something to the effect, Mattamy or De Gasperis, buy one of their homes and kill our Greenbelt. They've got to feel it. So we got to look at it. The other thing I was thinking about would be a great idea. We've got all these signs. We always see it when one of our veterans dies, and they're coming down the highway of heroes, and they've got flags and signs out there. What about on the 401, on those bridges, save the Greenbelt? We got the Little Wee signs, put them out right across the, and then see how many people see it. Because when we were in Vaughan, where was that lady? Oh yeah, we were with you out there at Vaughan, at the intersection of McNaughton, okay, and Keel, with the signs. You don't know how many people were beeping their horns in support. There's a lot of people out there support. I think we have to take it further. We got to show these people right across the cities. I don't know how many cars are driving on the 401, but they got to see those signs. So let's keep it up.
Yay. Thanks, Gary. You definitely went over your 45 seconds, but I'll allow it this time. I don't have a bell here, so go ahead.
I'll be quick. It's a question for the panel. I don't know who can answer it, but I think a guy named D'Amato was the guy that took this land off the Greenbelt, and Ford and Clark didn't micromanage, so they didn't know about it. And I'm thinking if we get D'Amato back, he might be the one guy in the province that knows how to reverse whatever he did. My question to the panel is, what exactly did he do, and has it really been deregistered? Is there something written, and can we reverse that? The second part is, have they dug holes in the ground yet for development? Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll have a go at it. Yeah, Ryan Amato was the chief of staff for Steve Clark, who was the Minister of Municipal Affairs. They're both gone now. Ryan Amato left first, and then Steve Clark eventually. And he gave put the package materials together for cabinet, so for his boss and for the premier and the rest of the cabinet ministers. And they made the decision to remove the lands from the Greenbelt. They have been removed from the Greenbelt, but no development has occurred on them. In fact, they're all still zoned as agriculture. So municipalities need to cooperate to rezone them and then to approve development applications. So we're still a ways away from seeing development occur, and I still think there's a real chance of stopping this development in its tracks. Now, Ryan Amato himself, was put in that position specifically to facilitate this back and forth in collusion with the developers, and and he did his job. He didn't have any deep background, as you would have seen in the media and stuff, in land use policy or anything else. In fact, his previous job was he was a driver for the finance minister, drove his car. So he's not particularly a policy expert in this area, Nice enough guy, I guess, but not really somebody you want to put in charge of land use planning in the Greenbelt. But yes, it can still go back into the Greenbelt, all these lands, and yes, that's where we're going to get to.
All right, thank you.
Can I just add quickly, one other thing we need to keep in mind is that the RCMP has been tasked with deciding whether or not any laws have been broken, and it's clear that D'Amato probably has a lot of information. I know it's difficult for the public to put pressure on the RCMP to actually go ahead with an investigation, but other people have gone to jail at the provincial level for far, far, far lesser alleged crimes. So, do what we can. We should do what we can to put pressure on the RCMP to make sure that a real investigation happens.
Quick question. I don't know the answer to this. That's why I'm asking it. Is there any act, law, regulation on the books of Ontario that protects grade A1 agricultural land from being sucked up, reused, rezoned, built on, and preserved to grow food for the province?
At a simple level, no. The growth plan, which is now being removed, being canceled by the current government, laid out procedures for protecting land and required a whole planning approach before cities or towns would be allowed to expand their urban boundaries. All of those procedures and requirements are now being removed so that boundary expansion or new subdivisions can occur at any time without any kind of rationale around new people moving to the area or being needed. So there was no strict prohibition on developing farmland. You could expand boundaries, but there used to be a fairly robust procedure before you could do that. All of that has been removed by the current government.
Yeah. So I'm just going to check it. Steve, do you still want me to? No, we're good for sound? Okay, perfect. Sorry, go ahead. Yep, we'll go Anna for, oh, sorry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Dixon Cohen. I hope everyone's having a good night here. Very interesting night. I'm just wondering, what do the politicians look at as far as building up, not out? It's something that really should, it just makes sense that if that practice is started, there will be a much better, a cleaner environment, because it's well known that the houses in the environment, number one, these houses have a huge portion to play when it comes to pollution, air pollution, There's also the water pollution that was talked about earlier a little bit, right? So, what is the best practice for building up, not out?
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then maybe David and Franz want to add to this, but the focus has been on building more densely within our communities, especially near transit stations, and most recently when the new official plans were developed for cities around the Greater Golden Horseshoe, they all had to be done by last fall. I'll give you an example, like 3 of the major areas, Hamilton, Halton, and Waterloo, all developed plans that concentrated all the new home development inside of their existing boundaries on that land that I told you about that had already been allocated. Or think of a place like Hamilton. If you've been to it, there's a lot of underdeveloped portion, like land in Hamilton that really could be redeveloped. So they decided that we're not going to have any more sprawl, no more boundary expansions. We're going to protect the Greenbelt outside of our city. We're going to protect farmland. We're going to build inside where we can access these new homes with our new LRT and all those kind of good things. The provincial government disallowed that plan. They vetoed it and forced them to expand their boundaries and removed all the density requirements from their official plan to allow low-density development. So all the efforts that are being made by cities to build more densely are being overridden by the province, and they're forcing them to build low-density sprawl on farmland.
David or Franz, do you want to?
I think the only thing
best practices?
The only thing I might add to that is that they've not only diminished the rules and regulations so that they're now easier to accomplish, but In fact, the ability of municipalities to carry out their role, traditional role, has been undermined by the province in a number of bills that have taken place, which now diminish the ability of councils, of the conservation authorities, other regulatory bodies. This allows the province to show the muscle and be the boss without having to worry about process in public.
However, there is hope. Remember, I said that municipalities still have a lot of power in determining planning in their local areas, in their jurisdictions, in their boundaries. I live in downtown Toronto, Bloor and Dufferin area, if you know where that is. We had a garage, a two-car garage that we never had cars in because I never needed to own a car because we live in downtown Toronto. We have access to great transit and could walk pretty well everywhere. Well, as an environmentalist, I also never earned a lot of money and never had a job with a pension, etc. So my spouse and I decided 3 years ago, well, we needed to do something to help us get through to retirement and also to create a place for us to live when we retire, when we age in place. So we tore down the garage and we built a laneway house. It's a 2-story laneway house that used to be on the same footprint as our garage. We now rent it out, and when the time comes, we're going to move in there and we're going to rent out the main house and we're going to get more income, and fingers crossed everything is fine. That's land. The garage was on land that wasn't being used properly, and we've now turned it into an asset which is going to help us financially, but it also provides housing. So this is one example of what a municipality can do by increasing density in existing residential areas. You can create a whole bunch of new housing. Is that going to solve the housing crisis? Absolutely not. But that is a piece in the puzzle, and that's something that we can all think about doing.
I've got a question here from Twitter. So we're also live streaming on Twitter and doing all kinds of fancy things. And I'm going to start with Myiingan, and then go down the panel. The question is, the Chiefs of Ontario, I know you're not here representing them officially, have put out a call to the provincial government about this. Can you explain that a little bit better? And do the panelists, the second part of the question is, do the panelists support the Chiefs of Ontario in their call?
So there was an emergency session of Chiefs of Ontario over this issue, and the issue talked about the thing that I was talking about earlier, which is the encroachment upon the Williams Treaty Territories by this government, and how they did this without consultation, even though they agreed that that's what they were going to do. So that is a serious breach to us, and probably something that maybe you should educate yourselves on as well, so that you can put that into your toolkit and use that as well.
And does everyone support? I'm going to assume yes, but I'm going to leave it open for you to talk about it. Support the calls from the Chiefs of Ontario in this regard.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, sure. Go down the line. That's what that's what Twitter's telling me to say, so that's what I'm saying.
Well, I wouldn't want to disappoint Twitter.
No, don't disappoint Twitter. It gets vile on there.
I'll tell Twitter I'll do my best.
Okay.
The Chief's absolutely right. One of the things that happened in the last little while has been the action taken by the collectivity of chiefs, and they've opposed what the government is doing. These days, that has a very strong message it sends to the government. We are far more sensitive to Indigenous needs than we ever were in our lifetime. And so organizations about treaties that deal with treaties, particularly the Williams treaties here of 1923, they are very important. They're not just interesting ideas and nice thoughts. They are legal events. And so that's why when the chiefs spoke and spoke on our behalf, it was very strong and very powerful. We should hope that they continue to do so.
Yeah, I think it's really important that the Chiefs of Ontario spoke up. Individual First Nations have also been raising concerns in one of the areas that we do a lot of on-the-ground work near the Rouge National Park. Mississaugas of Lake Scugog have been really active there in particular and really engaging with the public and the media, and it makes a huge difference. And I also know that because of the federal government's responsibilities around Indigenous rights and commitments to reconciliation, that when they make decisions about how they're going to enact federal intervention on some of these decisions being made by the province, that the views of First Nation communities matter a lot in that decision-making process, so it is really, really important.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that the Chiefs of Ontario are helping show us what we need to do, speaking with one voice, and also just to acknowledge yet again how much we share in common. And so I think it's fantastic that that happened, and I hope that this fight becomes an opportunity for you know, colonizers and settler communities to work with Indigenous peoples and you know, use their knowledge and have access to their knowledge and wisdom and show us a way forward.
Thank you. Twitter's done speaking to me now for now, so go ahead, Anna.
David, you had mentioned a little earlier about an 87 point, yeah, it's me, an 87-point list of things that a whole bunch of groups agreed on, and the government buried it. How do we get a hold of that list and shove it back in their face? Because if we keep bringing it out, they can't bury it. And what rights and what options do we have to make them start looking, you know, more seriously at stuff like that?
Well,
and how do you get a government like this to get the hell out of Dodge?
By doing what
Sorry,
we're doing
I'm in a
now,
church.
they need to understand that there's more and more people are interested in doing that. Secondly, or perhaps it should have been first, you can get, I can find copies for you. I have some copies. I chaired that review of some years ago. And it absolutely still speaks to our current needs. So they know that. One way to do it, by the way, is to speak, if you know any liberals or NDP people, they are also in the legislature. They can use that material. They can get copies, all the copies they want. All right, so I would look for Liberal and NDP members. Well, you might even try some Tory members, and if they send you one, get their name. That's a good way to do it, I think, because we need to. It's not because the recommendations were perfect, but we spent 2 years with thousands of people, and they're very thoughtful things. Some of them may not work anymore, don't know, but they should be part of the conversation, because I don't think in the history of Ontario we've seen such a body of work which was totally trashed within the week of the new government coming. They paid no attention to it, and it's a body of material that was done by Ontarians for Ontarians. So get in touch with the opposition members in particular, tell them you're interested in it, and they'll start. I'll do that myself as well, but it allows us to work with the opposition members and maybe the odd Tory member that you would know. They should know more about it. I cancel my stuff about the other two members. Send it to all parties. Get in touch with them all. Right? Yeah.
I'm from King Township, and you're talking about where are there shovels in the ground. I want you to know there's a project that has been given site plan approval and building permit issued without it ever going to council. And that's because of Ford's new rules. But this is going to be built. This isn't just on the Greenbelt. This is on the moraine. This is a structure that's going to go between a kettle lake and designated provincially significant wetlands. And the plans are to discharge stormwater into the lake, which is going to go down into the East Humber River. This kind of construction has never happened before in our township. We want help to try and stop it.
hopefully you'll connect with some people after the call we're not on a call, after the meeting, and maybe leave some literature or something at one of the tables if people are interested. I have Twitter speaking again to me. I'm sorry. I'm in a church. I'm getting voices from other places. Do the panelists see a concern or any suspicion surrounding the new Greenbelt review that is now being undertaken? Is this just an excuse? So why don't we go down this? Do you have anything, Myiingan, to start, or do you have any suspicions or concerns?
Again, like I said, you wake up each morning wondering what's going to happen next. That's what I'm talking about.
David, Tim, or Franz?
Yes, sure. The review is a ruse, first of all. They want to take people's minds off the $8.3 billion corruption issue that's so strong and hurting them. They're talking about the review, and other people talking about the review takes their mind and eyes off that. The review that they're talking about is a sham. Don't get taken into it, because it has nothing to do with how it should be done. They want the review to take land out of the Greenbelt. The whole point of the review that we've had so far, the one that we were involved in from 2015 to 2017, was how do we put more land into the Greenbelt, and how do we make the Greenbelt better? So they are engaged in a review for the destruction of the Greenbelt. Don't mistake it. Don't listen to them, and don't join it.
I think David's exactly right. I think one of the things that was very confusing for the public and the media is that when the new minister, Paul Calandra, came out and did his press conference, it sounded like maybe they were going to review the 14 areas of the Greenbelt that they'd taken out. But actually what they said in the details was, no, we're just going to forge ahead with that. The provincial development facilitator is going to try and pressure municipalities into getting, as the minister said, shovels in the ground as soon as possible. So they're forging ahead with the 14 sites that they corruptly removed. And they're launching a review, as David said, about the entire Greenbelt with the idea of taking a lot more land out of it. So if that's the objective of the Greenbelt review, it's counter to the legislation that it created. It's counter to the intent of the Greenbelt, which was meant to be off limits to development. That's the whole point of it. So it's a corrupt process from the beginning, and we'll be following it. We'll be engaging it in a way that makes sure that everyone knows the intent of it and how it's being implemented.
Thank you. We have time for probably about 2 or 3 more questions from the audience. Sorry, go ahead. Oh. I don't know who is first. I'm shooting from both sides here, so.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a suggestion. Our government ignores us. Every time you hear them talking, it's annoying. They're lying to our face, and they're not answering the questions, and they keep on talking about 1.5 million homes. I'm suggesting maybe we look at it from another point of view, that we put them on defense. Shame them. Using not online, because then you don't get to see, everybody gets to see it, but billboards, TV, newspapers, full page. Now, I know this is about money, and also you need to really figure out how you're going to shame them, how it's going to be done. Because we were talking, someone mentioned before about companies that are profiting from the Greenbelt. Anyway, that's my suggestion. I'm wondering if it's even feasible. Does it make any sense? Thank you.
Two ways to reach a broader audience, here in the province, and I think the media increasingly has been doing a good job on this issue. They've been asking better questions. They've been calling the premier and the minister out on lies more and more. They've been actually, behaving like responsible journalists and taking these guys on, and I think it's great to see. And obviously that generates lots of information and knowledge. But to your question around advertising, et cetera, we are about to go into that phase. We'll be launching television ads, radio ads, newspaper ads, online ads to counter the government's messaging. So everywhere you've heard of a government ad saying this is all be done for housing, you're going to hear one of ours saying that it's a lie and that it's been done to give $8.3 billion to developers. And you'll start hearing those next week.
I just want to add to that one point. Government is our government. And as important as it is to have these ads and so on and so forth, what matters the most is us talking to our elected officials. The more that we talk to them, the more they listen to us. The more of us that talk to them, the more of they're going to listen to us. So nothing, I would argue, is more important than picking up the phone or sending an email to your elected officials and letting them know what you think and believe and what you want them to do. That's the best way of ensuring that our government actually works for us.
You can also chase them down the aisle in the supermarket if they live in your neighborhood. It's always a good day to know.
And while we're talking about that, if you go to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And really, your point is something you need to think about. They're comfortable. They have to be inconvenienced. If they're not inconvenienced, they won't do what you want. They will remain where they are right now, not here. But you will get them out if you inconvenience them and have them speak to you. You can't allow this to keep going. You can't allow them to get reelected without talking to you, which is what happened last time.
And to follow up with that, at the SCGC table, we have leaflets that are geared towards Andrea Kangin, MPP Kangin, MPP Downey, and MPP Dunlop. They're in bundles of 50 for a reason. It's not just you taking a nice piece of information home. You take the whole bundle. You put them on your neighbor's doors. You put them at the doctor's office. You put them on people's windshields. Whatever you need to do, take a bundle. It's not going to get any better to what Jeff had said if we just allow them to be comfortable and just wring our hands behind the doors. It's not going to work. Go ahead. We're just wrapping up here, so if you can keep it quick, that would be great.
No, I'm timing it. So anyways, my name is Pete Stubbins, and I tasked myself in life with asking tough questions. First of all, I agree with everything I've heard in this room and is supportive of it. And I want to thank the Margaret Prophets and the Anna Bourgeois, the Sandy Agnews, and the Claire Malcolmsons of the world, and the panel for doing your hard work. Recently, Steve Pakeman had a show, and they were talking about the lack of supply housing in Ontario. And there's 4 panelists on that show, and they were all talking about supply, supply, supply. Steve Pakeman, to his credit, said, you know what, I get a lot of questions from people in Ontario, why aren't you talking about demand? So he put that question to the panelists. So the tough question is this: why is there such resistance to discuss population growth, which is a function of largely immigration in this province, as a function of increasing demand for the housing that, for instance, those 2 million houses that are currently in the greater Golden Horseshoe region that Environmental Defense actually talks about in their papers. And, you know, so Stephen Polis, who used to ex-governor of the Bank of Canada, said the number one reason, and he said this several times, the number one reason for housing prices so high is because of the scale of immigration. I don't make this up. Stephen Polis said that.
Okay, well, let's see what our panel has to say.
And Mark Moffat as well.
Okay.
He's a housing economist. Leger polls, Ecos polls. And even I've talked to a chief from Fort Francis many years ago, and the chief told me, he said, they never ask us how many people are invited into our territories. So I'm just throwing it out there. People may not like it, but it's a valid question. Thank you.
Sure. All right, anyone want to field it? Do you want me to field it?
take a go at it because I've heard this conversation quite a bit. You know, a lot of, you know, almost all of us at this table are new arrivals except for one. You know, we have an obligation as Canadians to make space. This is a complicated, increasingly difficult world, and we're incredibly fortunate in this country. Many of us have relatives from other places in the world. Many people suffer, frankly, from some of the policies that we inflict in other parts of the world. So we have an obligation to make space for people in this country, I believe. And yes, those people need places to live, but we don't have a shortage of land to supply new homes. We have a whole bunch of reasons that have conspired to make houses more unaffordable, and I talked about some of those tonight. But the solution forward is to build cities that actually do have affordable homes, both for people that are new arrivals, but both for the people that are already here and for, you know, the young people in this country.
Thank you. I don't think we have any time for any more questions. I know, oh, what, okay, very last one, Gloria.
Crombie, I don't know if you recall when you were the chair of the Toronto Regeneration Trust, Save the Oak Ridges Moraine appeared before you, and I recall so distinctly you asking me the question about how water, which travels underground through so many boundaries, and yet oil has the protection of so much legislation. So tonight here, I'm hearing a lot of discussion, and rightly so, on the upper levels of our soil. We need to really address water that travels very, very succinctly through different boundaries to the Great Lakes. Mr. Crombie, what do you say now that we need to be doing with this Greenbelt and DRAP to protect our water systems as a whole? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't think it's a complicated answer. I mean, I think we all know the answer. The reason we have the Greenbelt, the reason it has all the textures in it, all the history that we put into it for the last long while, it works in terms of, one of the purposes was to make sure that we're going to husband the water that we had and made sure that we weren't going to waste it, that we were going to do it properly. The whole idea of behind the Greenbelt and the legislation that went with it was in order to do that. What's under attack is exactly that. What you just described. There was a worry before, we're back where we were if these guys win.
I just want to, before we go, I just want to address Peter's question. And just give you a warning, because I've been on the other side of all of this. When I was a chief, we were fighting to protect the rights of our fishermen, our commercial fishermen on Christian Island. And there were 8 fishermen at the time with little small boats. And they were being accused of overfishing Georgian Bay. The math didn't even work, but the people that were making those accusations had money and they had access to publications, and those things went all Ontario-wide. And we were made to be the enemy. And this can happen to anybody. And that's what's happening now. They will use immigration as a tool, one way or the other. Right now they're saying, well, we need to build more houses for immigration because of immigration, but at the same time, on the other side, they'll be saying, we can't have any more immigration because they're taking this away from you. And we fall for that every single time. I know, because we've been on that. We've been on the other side of that, and we can't let it happen. The other thing is this, when they're talking about building houses, they're talking about building all these homes. I would say yes, if I saw our local MPP walking into the woods out here And every one of our communities has them, where the people without homes are living. And if they go in there and bring the people out by the hand to one of those homes that they just built, then we got something.
Well, Jeff, talk about making it difficult for me to close this down. Holy cow. Just emanating power. But I will close it down. You know, I want everyone to just remember a little bit about tonight. Take a look around at the people in the room. And sometimes we are waiting. Who is going to fix this? Who is going to make this right? Who are the people that are going to stand up to defeat this? And we are the people we're waiting for, right? So regardless of where you come from, what age you are, level of ability, race, creed, religion, we are the people that can take the future of this province to better places. We don't have to listen to the stories that we're meant to be destitute, that we're meant to be with poor services, that we're meant to be stuck in our cars, that our environment is a place to kill so that we can prosper. We don't have to live with that story anymore. So I want people to remember that we are the people we're waiting for. No one else is going to be coming for us. A little quick analogy before we left, a little story. Some of you know this, so you can go to sleep now if you've already heard it. My father was raised in Holland. 1932, he was born. He was roughly 7 years old when the Nazis came into his village, and his family was terrorized, starved, the whole bit. And he died when I was 21, but he always told me that democracy may feel very inconvenient. It might become a thing where you say, gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. Why isn't someone just doing their job? Why do I have to do this? So it can feel very inconvenient. It can feel like I don't have time for this. But he told me that no matter how inconvenient democracy feels, it is way worse when you don't have it. That is inconvenience, right?
Well done, Barrie.
So I'll dedicate that little speech to my dad. As you leave tonight, first I want to say a big thank you to our panelists. I think you were amazing.
Stand up.
You guys are making this tough to moderate because I have to break up the energy all the time. Jeez. But I also want to thank Reverend Susan Eagle and her wonderful team for hosting us tonight. I want to give a big shout out to the volunteers who made tonight happen, coming early, eating cheap pizza instead of being at home with their families. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you to all of you. Make sure on your way out that you stop at the tables. We have an organizers meeting coming up on September 26th at Tuesday, 7 p.m. It's going to be in person. If you were motivated tonight and you're like, okay, let's actually start making plans here. We've learned enough, let's stop talking, let's start moving. There is a sign-up sheet at the SCGC table to please register, and we'll get in touch with you about that organizers meeting. Next week, there's a Greenbelt wave starting across Ontario, calling MPPs. Yes, I know they're not here. Yes, I know they don't pick up. Yes, I know they don't answer their phone. I get it, but that's a part of the game. Yes, and Claire is waving paper at the back, which I'm assuming is about registering for the phones app, yes. We have leaflets in packs of 50. Take a 50 or 100 or 150. And we have the Greenbelt signs. This is not over. This is the beginning. And if you have it in your heart and wallet to help us offset the cost of tonight's event, that would be really great, because we're mostly just doing this with scraps. So we appreciate all of you for being here. Again, remember, do not lose sight of your place in democracy. You are not a victim of it, you are the driver of it. So let's drive.
Good for you.